Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to episode 4 of Let's Talk with Lee. I'm from Conquer Your Confidence, and you may also know me from Alpha Tenacity. Today's topic of discussion is going to be fear. I think most of us can agree most fears are irrational. Most fears are unreasonable. But we also mustn't confuse fear and danger. Fear may be irrational, but danger is very real. So in this video, we're going to break fear into 3 categories. We're going to break it down into danger, so the primitive action of fear. We're going to break it down to irrational fears. And then we're going to have a quick look at systematic desensitization. So something that it's going to help you maybe overcome a phobia or a more realistic fear and not an irrational fear. So that's the topic we're going to look at, because what the idea of this video is, we're going to try and rewire your brain, and we need to reframe fear. Often we see fear as such a bad thing, we shouldn't be fearful of anything. But what would life be like if we didn't have fear? And I think most of us can kind of agree that life would be quite boring without fear. Because maybe you've done something like, let's say, a parachute jump, and you have that adrenaline and that fear before you make that jump. And then finally, when you've done it, you know that it's, often people say it's one of the best experiences of their lives. So we need to reframe fear and not see it as such a bad subject or a bad word. Like I said, life would be very boring without fear, because sometimes it gives us that adrenaline rush. So guys, let's get into this. Episode 4, let's talk about, so let's get into this topic. You're going to learn some really good techniques to help overcome phobias. I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide to overcome irrational fears. And then we're going to have a quick discussion on the primitive state of fear, otherwise known as danger. Obviously, this is going to be a brief video to discuss fears and phobias and such, but normally during the coaching sessions that I run, one-to-one or in group sessions, we go into a lot more detail and we really help people conquer fear and dethrone fear, and not to be fearful of the word fear. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so like I said, fear is irrational, but danger is very real. And for anyone that's been in a dangerous situation, our minds still have not really evolved over the last hundred thousands of years. As a species, we have evolved, but our minds are still very primitive. So when we find ourselves in life-threatening situations, dangerous situations, we have 3 responses. And maybe some of you know this, but they're known as the 3 Fs. Freeze, flight, or fight. Now, for anyone that's not been in a dangerous situation, and you're quite intrigued to know what your response would be in a dangerous situation, you can often find out in it just by simple as having a cold shower. Or maybe it's something when you've gone to the seaside and you get into the sea. You'll see 3 different types of responses. People will dip their toe in and then they'll just run off. That's your flight response. The next one is your freeze response. You see people, they walk into the sea and they do this, don't they? They clench up everything in their body, they just stand still and they wait for the waves to crash over them. That's your freeze response. Then you have your fight response. Those are the people that they just don't give a fuck. They just run straight into the water, dive head first, get it out of the way. So that's the 3 Fs. Fear, freeze, and fight. So maybe if you ever wanted to know what your reaction would be in a life-threatening or dangerous situation, try a cold shower. See how you react. So number 2 in our topic of fear is irrational fears. So fear is the biggest enemy to success. Nothing will hold you back more in life than fear. And like I've said already, fears are very irrational. They're very unreasonable. So Irrational fear could be something like you're wanting to start your own business, but you're fearful of making that first step. So in a minute, we're going to show you a quick step-by-step guide how you can overcome this. Another fear, irrational fear, could be one of an economic downturn. You know, especially at this current time where we're all living in a very fearful world, and we're also very fearful of the future because maybe some people have lost their jobs, or so they're very worried about employment, or they're worried about the economy and the access of money. But with economic downturn, the only way we can really overcome something of this fear, something that is not happened yet, is to plan. You know, so let's, for instance, if you are scared of an economic downturn, put a plan into place. You know, start looking at how you can get ready for this economic downturn that you so fear. But again, we're looking at something that's not happened and is actually really just irrational fear, and is very unreasonable. So anything that you're fearful of in the future, the best way to try and overcome this is to plan. Plan so if your worst fears come true, you are ready. And this will give you some kind of comfort, knowing that if the worst happens, you are ready. But now let's get into a more serious one. One of the biggest ones I come across is somebody is fearful of starting their own business. Now, why is that? It's very simple. Because people like security. And like I said, fear is the biggest enemy of success. People will value security more than anything. So if it's something as simple as starting your own business, we need to be courageous. So that's step one. We need to be courageous and value being courageous over our security. Because at one point in our lives, we're going to have to make the leap of faith. We're going to have to make that jump. Because this is what we want. This is our dreams. You know, starting a business can really change your life. But we value this security so much. So step two to overcoming starting your own business or an irrational fear. Step two is visualize yourself without this fear. So again, let's refer back to wanting to start your own business. What would it be like if you didn't have this fear of starting your own business? Well, then you would just do it, wouldn't you? Because no little voice would be in the back of your head saying, oh, you can't do this, it's going to fail. That voice would be gone. So visualize yourself without this fear. Step three, be positive. Have self-belief. You know, I often see this, and it's quite an interesting topic to bring up. How many of you have given advice to your friends about starting a business? So a friend has come to you and said, oh, I'm thinking about starting a business. Now we have faith in our friends and we're saying, yeah, you should totally do it. You're going to be awesome at that. But when it comes to ourselves, all our self-belief just goes out the window. We will believe in others, but we never believe in ourselves, which is a very strange topic and a very strange way of thinking, but it's very common. So be positive. Don't always look at the negative. You know, obviously starting a business, there is some risk involved, but imagine if it all works out. So be positive, have self-belief. Step 4, do your motivation. What's your motivation for this? Why is starting a big business your focus? So again, you know, this could be something as you wanting better for yourself or for your family. You know, you don't really have any enthusiasm for your current role or your current position in life. So when we look at an irrational fear like starting a business, we've got to understand our motivation. Why are we doing this? What do we want from this? And if we can picture this motivation and we can focus, it's going to give us clarity on our thoughts. Step 5, dethrone fear. And most of all, question the fear. You know, we have simple self-reflection questions that you can ask yourself. And one really good one, if it's something you're fearful of, ask yourself, is your fear logical? So if you, again, we refer to starting your own business, ask yourself, is this fear logical? Because if you are fearful of starting your own business, where does this fear come from? you've never tried it before, how do you know it won't be a success? Or maybe you have tried starting your own business before and it didn't work out. But then we can learn from these lessons, and actually we're much further ahead than we were because we've experienced it, we've conquered the fear, and we've come back recharged. So question the fear, and ask yourself, is your fear logical? Because, and this can be for anything, if you're wanting to start your own business or you're fearful of how others perceive you, again, ask yourself the same question, is your fear logical? Because if you keep getting these, if the answer is continuously no, but you kind of find yourself fearful about everything, then obviously we're actually more looking not at an irrational fear, but more at self-doubt and some insecurities. So actually we might not be fearful, we might actually just be lacking confidence and have insecurities. Okay, so let's go over those 5 steps again. So for irrational fears, number 1, be courageous. Devalue security, value being courageous. Step 2, visualize yourself without this fear. What would your life be like if you didn't have this fear? The fear that's holding you back, the fear that is the enemy to your success. Number 3, be positive, have self-belief, have blind fucking faith in yourself. Number 4, what's your motivation? The understanding, the focus of why you want to do this. What's your motivation? And keep that motivation at the forefront of your mind. You know where you've been, so understand now where you're going and keep that motivation at all times. Step 5, question fear. Like I said, we're so scared of fears. We're scared to even say the word fear, but question it. And if you have a fear, ask yourself, is this fear logical? In our third area, we're going to look at phobias. We're going to look at something called systematic desensitization, or a desensitization hierarchy. This has a very high success rate and has a higher success rate than maximum exposure. It may be sometimes if you have a fear, say you have a fear of spiders, you go maximum exposure, just hold a spider. This desensitization hierarchy has a much higher success rate. So I'm going to show you how to do this. The next one is the good thing about a desensitization hierarchy is you can set your own limits. Yeah, it's done on your threshold. It's done on your limitations. So you set your limits and you take each step by step when you feel comfortable. So systematic desensitization works. And how do I know it works? Because I've used this on myself. When I was younger, I used to have a fear of flying. And this fear was irrational. And where did it come from? Well, where it came from was I was on a flight to Spain. The plane took off from Gatwick. We'd reached about 10,000, maybe 5,000 feet. And all of a sudden there was this loud bang on the plane. The lights went out. There was a loud spark. And the plane was completely dark for about 10 minutes. And everyone was kind of looking around. And, nobody really knew what was happening. There was quite a bit of panic on the plane. So the plane carried on flying for about half an hour. And the pilot came on and explained that our plane had actually been hit by lightning and we'd actually lost one of the engines. So now we'd have to turn around and fly back. He also explained to us that we would be releasing fuel to help the plane glide down. So we would hear some loud noises and we will feel sudden rushes because he would have to drop multiple feet at a time to help ease the plane and to make an emergency landing. So obviously after this announcement there was a lot of panic, there was a lot of screaming, kind of everything was kind of rushing around. It was a bit of a crazy time. Obviously everything had happened and everything was safe because I'm still here now. And so this actually gave me an irrational fear of flying. After this event, I would wake up with panic attacks of flying, and I vowed that I would never fly again. But I had to make the decision. If I chose not to fly again, then I couldn't experience all the wonders in the world. You know, I couldn't go out and experience all the culture that surrounds us in the world. So I knew I had to conquer it. So I booked a flight. It was a small flight to a small Spanish island, but leading up to this flight, I was having so many panic attacks. I had nightmares constantly every night that the plane was going to crash or everything that bad was going to happen. I believed it was going to happen. So I couldn't live like this. I couldn't carry on my life like this. So I had to conquer this fear. So I used systematic desensitization. I used the desensitization hierarchy. So I started to be very fearful of just going to the airport. So step one of my hierarchy, I would drive to the airport. I wasn't catching a flight at times. I would just drive and start to make myself feel comfortable being around airports and around aeroplanes. I did this 2 or 3 times, and I got myself into the airport, made myself feel relaxed, and then I would go home. So that would be step one, conquered on the hierarchy. Then I started to get a really strong relaxation technique and started to take smaller flights. So I would fly to Dublin, which is a 55-minute flight, to, again, dipping my toe in the water, practice my relaxation techniques. So obviously I overcame my fear of flying by using this desensitization hierarchy, because since then I've taken many flights. I feel very comfortable, you know, and as we all know, flying is one of the safest ways to travel. And again, the fear was irrational. Okay, something happened to cause this fear, but actually it was all, looking back, it was all very safe. It's actually very common for planes to get hit by lightning, but I still developed this fear, a fear that was going to hold me back, a fear that was going to be an enemy to my success. So this is why this is so good. Okay, so maybe you don't have a fear of flying, but let's say you have a fear of spiders. So how, if you have a fear of spiders, how can we use this desensitization hierarchy? Okay, so first of all, before you try a desensitization hierarchy, the first thing you must do is have a very strong core of a relaxation technique. This is the key point. If you don't have a strong relaxation technique, this is not going to work. So that's homework number 1. Get a relaxation technique, a breathing framework, you know, that's really strong, because this is the key to this hierarchy. So once you're comfortable and you have this strong relaxation technique, this strong breathing framework there, this is when we can start to look at the hierarchy. So like I said, I'm going to use the example of spiders. So step 1 in our hierarchy, we would go into our relaxation technique, yeah, and we would make the simple thing as just to look at a picture of a spider, yeah, but we would be in this strong relaxation. We would have our breathing under control. This would just be step 1, the simple step of looking at a spider. Maybe that's too far, so again, you set your limits. Maybe it could be just the thought of a spider rather than a picture. Again, you set your limit, but this is an example of a hierarchy. So, relaxation, breathing under control, you touch a picture of a spider, or you look at a picture of a spider. So that's step 1 on our hierarchy. Then we move on. Step 2. Again, you set your own limit, but you find your strong relaxation, you get your breathing under control, and you try to be in the same room as a spider. Maybe for 1 second, maybe if you're strong 10 seconds, maybe if you're amazing 1 hour. But you can see here how we're starting to build up these small increments, these little baby steps into conquering our fear. So step 2, be in the same room as a spider. Number 3, again, we know this is the basis of this, a strong relaxation technique, our breathing under control. Then after we've looked at a picture of a spider, been in the same room as a spider, we step that up 1 more. Stand next to a spider, Rather than being in the same room, we get a little bit closer, all while maintaining this strong breathing, a strong physiology, as well as our relaxation technique. The next one is the big one. So touch, hold, maybe if you feel that you're ready for that next step. But this is what's so amazing about a desensitization hierarchy, is you set your limits. So maybe you can't go from touch a picture, be in the same room, stand next to, and then move on to hold. Maybe you start even smaller. Maybe you just look at a picture, then you touch a picture, then be in the same room, or even be in the same house as a spider. Using this to your advantage, this desensitization hierarchy, has a really high success rate. And I'll tell you why. Because the key to a desensitization hierarchy is, as humans, we can't feel two emotions, opposing emotions, at the same time. So what does that mean? When you're in your strong relaxation technique, and when you're in your zone of relaxation, a human can't feel fear. It can't have that phobia when it's in a relaxation mode, because it's two opposing emotions. And as humans, we can't experience two opposing emotions. So this is why it's so good. But again, the key to this, for this to be successful, is your relaxation, your breathing framework, your physiology has to be strong, and it has to be unimpenetrable. So for us to conquer this, that needs to be our core. For us to be relaxed and have a strong breathing framework. So, and actually now we kind of get into the end of it. Systematic desensitization is not really dissimilar to our other little step-by-step guide for overcoming irrational fears. To be courageous, visualize yourself without this fear. That's a hierarchy in itself. So we can now see a pattern. To overcome fears and phobias, set yourself small, conquerable goals. Daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly goals. And this is where we can start taking those steps to conquering any fear, conquering phobias. So there we have it. Fear. We looked at the three areas. Danger, the primitive emotion, something that's just natural, it's built within our frame, it's built within ourselves, it's built within our framework. We looked at irrational fears, starting your own business. We gave you a step-by-step guide. And then we talked about systematic desensitization, which can often be used as phobias. Again, this will not cure all phobias, and depending where you sit on the extreme level of your phobia, but I know this is a proven one. This has been proven. It has a very high success rate. So there we have it. Fear. Thank you for watching. Go out there, conquer your fears, dethrone fear, and don't let fear be the enemy to your success. Thank you.